leave. But there's a twist. They've got a 6-month grace period to reconsider their decision. It doesn't look like they will change their minds, though. They have made it clear there's no going back. In fact, the 3 countries have now formed their own group. It's called the Alliance of Sahel States, AES. Time will tell how this group relates and collaborates with ECOWAS going forward. This is coming after the 3 countries, all founding members of ECOWAS since 1975, refused to restore democratic rule, a demand made by the regional bloc right after military takeovers in those countries. So what does this mean for the region's political future, economic integration that ECOWAS has fostered over the years? A 15-member regional bloc, I think the numbers tweeted now, with the exit of these 3 countries. I'll be joined by 2 distinguished guests on the program this morning. One, a political analyst, the other, an ambassador, a diplomat and human rights advocate, to take a look at all of these developing stories, what they mean for the region, especially at the time where the chairman of ECOWAS is president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. President Tinubu's chairmanship has come under scrutiny with the way the regional bloc handled the military takeovers in these 3 countries. The concepts of raising what is it called now? Trying to clamp down on military takeovers, the issues that were raised as regards how long this can take before a transitional government comes into play. There are also questions as regards whether or not the intended military interventions that the regional bloc talked about did see the light of the day. The accusations that ECOWAS is run under foreign influence. We saw the sanctions, the ultimatums. Did the regional bloc actually played fair and clean? And were the right decisions made with the suspensions and the sanctions? Those are some of the issues that have come under scrutiny. Recall the Economic Community of West African States Monitoring Group, ECOWONG, which is the military arm of ECOWAS, was formed in 1990. The concept of this military arm is to regularly intervene in conflicts within the region. And we saw some intervention in Liberia, I think in 1990, Sierra Leone in 1997, 1999 in Guinea-Bissau, and 2003 in Cote d'Ivoire, the most recent being the intervention in the Gambia in 2017. So at the time that these military takeovers began in 2020, we saw ECOWAS raising concerns and, as a matter of fact, asking that its military arms stand by in some of these cases, but it didn't go beyond that. So did ECOWAS chicken out? Was there some display of weakness in the handling of military takeovers? It is a policy issue. This group doesn't allow military takeovers. So how does it respond if 3 of its members go that path? There are also accusations of ECOWAS coming under the influence of foreign powers. Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger released a statement stating that this betrays the founding principles of ECOWAS and that it's become a threat not only to their own countries but also their population. These are huge concerns. So these 3 countries are founding members of the regional bloc. So why did they leave? Was the suspension the right call at the time it happened? The accusations of failing to support the way and manner they have decided to fight terrorism and insecurity, while also imposing what they call illegal and irresponsible sanctions. That's what the military junta has talked about. Military leaderships in the 3 nations have vowed to tackle the rise of violent armed groups in their countries and have also joined forces in the so-called Alliance of Sahel States. The implication of this is also that we've seen a shift of alliance from the West to countries like Russia. And Russia did release a statement, if you recall, aligning with the position of ECOWAS that peace returns and democracy returns, but showed some reservation as regards its intention for military intervention. Now, as we speak, the Sahel region is already grappling with insurgency and terrorism, and what's going to be the implication of these three countries leaving ECOWAS on the regional insecurity? What measures can ECOWAS take now to mitigate these tasks? Senegalese president, we understand, is at the forefront of peacemaking between both the regional bloc and these three countries. President Bassirou Faye, we saw him at that meeting on Sunday. He's been at the forefront of mediation between ECOWAS and the three departing countries. And is quite optimistic that things will get better, even though it doesn't look like that on paper. But what also is the impact that this international mediation can have on the situation as we have it, and the role it will play in the coming months, especially the fact that the three countries say, you know what, we're going to maintain our visa-free policy for the regional bloc for all ECOWAS citizens post-exit, and perhaps this seems to have alleviated concerns that their departure could threaten free trade and movement for millions, hundreds of millions of people living across the region. Because it is a conflict-ridden zone, you expect a lot of people to move from those areas to other parts of ECOWAS. And also, it's also important to note at this point that these are critical times for the region. At a time where insecurity is rife, the challenges with ISIS and terrorism, it's important that these countries work together on the same front rather than working against one another. These are the conversations we look forward to having this morning. We'll take a short break, and when we return, we'll kickstart the conversation. We're also going to open the phone lines for your contribution. We're on Twitter. You can tweet to us, on X rather. Remember to use hashtag this morning, tag at TVC News, and if you tag me at Nifemi Oguntoye, it will be easy to read your tweets. Stay with us, everyone. Don't go away. You're watching Beyond 100 Days with Nifemi Oguntoye. President Tinubu, since he assumed office,
they are on our way to progress.
6 out of the 8 APC federal lawmakers.
I have a movement structure that's going to take back our party in Enugu State. Because this one I'm seeing is just by moonlight. It's not working.
So I'm wondering what you think, or who you think can stop him now.
He doesn't own the party.
One of the causes of inflation is because people cannot go to the farm.
The government still needs to do more so that people can eat.
I believe what clamoring for is more responsible use of social media. Not that people just go in there and think that they can say anything to anybody.
Tinubu is not one who believes in the simple. I mean, he wants to get it done. He will face it, he will get it done.
Yes, the president, from inception of his administration, focused squarely on diversifying the economy and driving investments to, cushion the effect of everything that we've seen, ranging from COVID-19 to the global commodity shocks, global financial crisis, and all of that.
I was privileged to have worked under a governor who believed in the system, who also built up the system, and I'm going to do same.
All right, that's our show today, everyone. Thanks for being a part of it.
TVC News, first with breaking news.
Every weekday on Business Nigeria, we uncover the secrets of the financial world.
We analyze the stock market, shares, bonds, and the thrilling world of cryptocurrency.
Facts matter. Our team dives deep to separate facts from popular opinion.
We simplify complex government policies as it impacts your everyday life, helping you navigate the ever-changing financial landscape.
Watch Business Nigeria every weekday at 2 p.m. only on TVC News. First with breaking news.
Sometimes it's the story that calls. At other times, the people just want to be heard.
School, I need students, but I need teacher.
Can't continue like this.
Their voices re-echoing through time itself.
We haven't done anything. If the tide is high, everybody run for safety.
Their tears leave a sweet sour taste for all their demands. A familiar call beckoning for change. In our world, no one expects a disaster to happen. But when it does, we'll be there to x-ray all sides, from the east to the west, north and south. Community Forum will examine the oddities and challenges to economic development, as well as issues yearning for government intervention. Watch fresh episodes of Community Forum on Sundays by 9:30 p.m. only on TVC News.
Every major news story is with many perspectives and layered with different levels of impact.
Hello. What time did this happen? We will be right there.
Thanks for staying with us, everyone. Let's continue our conversation. The big one from West Africa. As regards the position of the regional bloc to allow Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso to leave the bloc, and also the 6 months grace that has now been extended to them to be able to see if there could be a way to resolve the matter. It's Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. Joining me is Global Affairs Analyst, Comrade Ayodele Adewale. Comrade, good to see you again. Good morning, and thank you for coming on the program.
Thank you for having me. Merry Christmas in advance.
Wish you the same. So a 6-month grace period, some say, is another of ECOWAS' attempt to reverse what is irreversible based on what we've heard these 3 countries say. As a matter of fact, they've even aligned together under another umbrella. What do you think are the chances of using this time to convince them to stay? Is that still feasible?
Well, it's all about diplomacy, and in global diplomacy, you keep engaging in talks and try to align on the basis of interest. As it is now, their common interest is to do away with their colonial masters, and of course to develop their system in a way that it will benefit, quote and unquote, their people. But the world has moved away from military action. The world prefers that we go through a democratic system of electing your leaders. And I think that's where the gap is. If they've gone through a democratic system, nobody will be saying anything. But President Tinubu has tried his best and is doing his best and is providing leadership. Because some people were hoping that they would use military action, to remove them. But we must not be quick to forget that they're a sovereign nation. And of course, we don't want any human fatality in that process. And take it or leave it, beyond the geographical expression, carving out nations and all of that. If you remove the borderline, we are all brothers in Africa. And a lot of Nigerians are all over the place. And I'm also very happy that ECOWAS have not imposed grave sanctions, so to speak. Because if you look at what happened in Nigeria during the military era, where Europe and some other countries imposed sanctions on Nigeria, the military adventurers were not particularly affected. It was the Nigerian people that were affected. And that is why I continue to thank President Tinubu for that leadership, not to listen to some people who would have wanted ECOWAS to block all trade relationship with these countries and, of course, impose heavy sanctions that will cripple the activity of those countries and, by so doing, render the people hopeless.
We saw some level of sanctions, though. As a matter of fact, that's why these countries decided to exit ECOWAS. Even in Nigeria, along the border areas, along the north, our own people started complaining about the impact on the economy, the fact that they could not go to the market and what have you. But Mr. President, our own president, his chairmanship of the regional bloc has come under heavy scrutiny. The way and manner ECOWAS has given those sanctions, the ultimatums. There was an intended military intervention where the military arm was asked to stand by in those areas. We've seen ECOMOG have some interventions in the past in countries like Cote d'Ivoire, Guinea-Bissau. The recent one, I believe, was the Gambia in 2017. There are those who think that the way ECOWAS handled these military takeovers made it look weak. If you're not going to use military intervention, why stand by your forces?
They didn't make it look weak. Those were part of the ECOWAS charter. If you look at their charter, you will see that whenever things like this happen, there are some key point action that you need to take. But those key point action, are they going to quickly provide solution, especially when you have big powers behind these military adventurists? And that place would have just been used as a pseudo point of war. And it can also flow into Nigeria and some other ECOWAS countries, especially when we are still fighting insurgency, banditry, and all of that. You're going to have proliferation of arms and ammunition all across the place. So if they had followed that fully, we will also be in that dragnet of that catastrophe, if I may use that word. But again, President Tinubu also had to push back, push back, because he is driven by law, right? He's driven by the rules that is in the ECOWAS Charter. So he has to also, discuss with other countries that are in the ECOWAS, political structure, that look, let's try some other diplomatic angle in order to solve this problem. In the case of the ECOMOG, that was a full-fledged war, right? It was not just a military takeover. It was a full-fledged war that was ravaging the whole place, and people were dying and all of that. ECOMOG had to come in at that point to push all of the warring faction back and try to provide, a space where they can return back to normalcy. So you cannot compare the situation during ECOMOG and the situation that we find in these countries as of now.
I hear you clearly, and I understand your position. There are instances, for instance, I think it was in Cote d'Ivoire, where the incumbent president refused to step aside after losing an election, and ECOWAS also had to intervene military-wise. There are times when coup d'etat happened, it snowballed into violence. They also had to send their forces to help other regional efforts in those places. But there's the big accusation from the three countries that ECOWAS is under influence of foreign powers. According to them, this betrays the founding principles, and they see it as a threat to their population and the countries as member states. They've also talked about the very beautiful relationship that exists between our own president and the French president. What do you make of this development?
The relationship is good. There's a lot of gains in it, apart from Nigeria. It also helped to be an arbiter between those who are saying the colonial masters should leave and those colonial rulers as at then, also have some interest in those countries. So you need someone to midwife a very smooth transition so that it does not balkanize the country and does not balkanize their economy. Take it or leave it, by the time the French fully exit the country, those countries also have their monies in the French economy. How are they going to pull back those monies for the benefit of their country? You understand? The issue of language is still there. They need to transit from French-speaking to a national lingua that they will all have to accept. So there's a lot of intricacies involved. So in international diplomacy, you need someone to help you straighten all of these things, and everybody, continue to journey for good. Don't forget that there was a time that the French colonized UK, Britain, but today they are allies. Don't also forget that the French also helped the Americans to liberate their country from the British. But today, they are all allies working together. So in international diplomacy, you must find a way to keep your interest without breaking relationship. that can help all of you to strengthen all of your interests and move along.
Some say there are bigger lessons here for democracy in Africa and those that practice it. As long as we all agree, there is this unspoken consensus that it is the finest, system of government applicable. But we've seen situations where if you push it too close to the wall, because in these countries, one thing was common. The population was right behind the military juntas. And you saw what happened recently in Syria, where people take arms, but then they take it in alignment, in support of the generality of the people. And that gives it some level of acceptance, at least within those countries.
Well, you've just talked about leadership and rulership, right? In both angles, what matters more is what system benefits the people, right? Some will argue that leadership is better because in leadership, if you link it to a democratic system of government, the people participate and they tend to elect their leaders. If the system goes very well, everybody will still come together after the election to work for country. But in rulership, it's not always like that. Somebody imposes himself on you, and if you have an imposition of a structure of government or governance...
You don't think that also happens consistently under democracy? Some will tell you that the fact that it is a democracy doesn't mean that the leader wasn't imposed.
I had answered you earlier. I said if it is done rightly,
indeed,
everybody in the opposing contention will come back after the process and work for nation. I did say that. And I was talking about rulership now. The rulership itself will impose its dictates and dictum on you, right? And presupposes that whatever that comes from them as an idea should take care of everyone. But it's never so. Some people will prefer to take this angle, right, and continue to journey with their own survival, while others will say no. But the majority will have to take the day. And in some cases where the rulership is seen that is being contended, like what you saw in Syria, they will now start using the rule of force. When the rule of force comes in, brutality and all of that comes into play. Killing, suppression of rights, right? And human abuse, right abuse, and all of that. And that is the far-flung of fascism. And when you get to that point, the people will rebel. It's not to say that in some corners of the world, you still have other forms of government, like monarchy. There's a monarchical system that tends to, take their country for good, and they're leading for their betterment and all of that. But again, it takes away rights, because my right begins at where your right stops, in some cases. So the question of rights is the equator in any form of government. And it has been proven that in a democratic system of government that tend to obey rights of people, right, is the best form of government.
As long as it is done the right way, like you said. So let's talk about the implication on, security in the region. The Sahel region, as we speak, is already grappling with insurgency, with terrorism, and now we're looking at an impending exit of 3 countries that, are probably bearing the brunt of these challenges. What measures do you think ECOWAS must take now to mitigate these risks?
And that is what the leadership of ECOWAS have done, to allow free trade to continue. You understand? Despite the fact that there are talks that are still ongoing to transit them from military rule to democratic system. Because if you cut short of all of these things, it is going to create an avenue for crime to start to fester. And some of this crime, again, will move to what was just mentioned, which is insurgency, banditry, and they are all forms of crime. But those are the far end of a criminal activity that we do not hope to see. And when you get to that point where people see that their survival is based on the level and sophistication of arms that they carry, it is very difficult to pull them back. In fact, you spend more time, more money, and all of these things because they would have evolved into an ideology that carried them along. And that ideology will weaponize the quest for materialism. And when you get that, it is going to put you in a dire strait.
I think it was on Saturday, the three nations stated that their territories would remain visa-free for all ECOWAS citizens post-exit. And perhaps this may have allayed some fears that the hundreds of millions of people in that area can enjoy free trade and movement. Do you think there will come a time where the need for economic cooperation and integration will overwhelm these differences that we currently see?
Oh, definitely, definitely. The question in those countries now is power, right? The second thing is how to balance and sustain power. And that is why they are aligning with those two big countries, especially Russia, right? It's a global power and all of that. And China is also an industrial global power nation. So they've aligned with those two countries. The other countries too would want to return them back to a state of normalcy where everybody can relate with each other. And don't forget that one of those countries has a very high deposit of lithium, which the world needs as of now. So they are the bride on the table. So many people will continue to talk to them. But the greatest equation in this whole imbroglio is the people, right? Regardless of the mineral resource that those global countries want, the people must survive. The people owns power. If the people decide to rise up today and confront those people, it's a question of how many people will you kill. But again, they will overwhelm you. We've seen it happen during the era of the Shah that brought in Lenin to take over power in Russia, right? We've seen it happen in France that created the French Revolution, and they removed the monarchy there. We've seen it happen in Libya and even in Iran, right? Monarchy was there. The people rose up. So it's about people. And that is why I'm very happy that ECOWAS have not blocked trade relationship, allow people to move, relate with themselves, do trade and all of that. It will reduce the pressure in those countries. It will also reduce the pressure on us. What some international countries would have wanted is to block all the place, weaponize the people to now confront their oppressors. And in doing that, we are going to lose a lot of lives. The end might be achieved at the long run, but it could take a long time, right, to achieve that purpose. And a lot of people would have died, and infrastructures would have been destroyed. You now have to start from ground zero to build a country, instead of you to move from the point where you are and sustain the civilization and development.
There's what some stakeholders called a proactive approach that the regional bloc, a proactive responsibility that the regional bloc carries, and it has to do with checkmating the excesses of democratic leaders. I mean, certain things were happening in these countries before the military took over, and the ECOWAS just watched it happen all along. And then at the point where the military took over, you now want to dictate to them what to do. So you don't think that it is shared responsibility such that if you are not performing, even though you were democratically elected, you have a responsibility to the regional bloc that you represent?
In the case of Nigeria, as you just mentioned, in that era, because I'm a product of that era, I was a student union leader, activist in that era, where the military had taken power. And we did play our role and all of that. But if I look back, we also lost a lot of our people, right? A lot of students were killed. A lot of journalists got missing. Some were killed. A lot of our leaders like Alfred Riwani and the rest were killed. We would have loved them to be alive, for us to be together now. Those are part of what you tend to lose. Those ECOWAS countries, as at then, did not have what it takes to confront the rulership in Nigeria as of that time. Is it in terms of money, in terms of military arsenal, or what have you? Nigeria was the dominant power, right, at that era. And there was nothing they could do. The best they could do was to keep talking and appealing to those military adventurers to go back to democratic dispensation. Dialogue is very important. While we Nigerians continue to engage them on the street, and some of our leaders, like the president of Nigeria, President Tinubu, and the rest, were outside, advocating for return to democratic dispensation and of course calling out the military leaders to leave the system. After a very long while, we achieved it, right? We achieved it, but if we look back and see all what we have lost in terms of economic gains, in terms of infrastructural development, and human life, it is quite very heavy and all that. So in moving forward, we have an ECOWAS now with a Nigeria in a democratic system, with a Nigeria that has all the powers that it has, with a Nigerian president that is loved all around. You saw how he was welcome in France. You saw the German, was it the German president or chancellor that came in recently to also wanting to work with them. These are not just visits. They are also boardroom discussion that will take place with regards to what is happening within the surroundings of Nigeria and the Nigerian state itself. You can also see the reverse conversation that is going all around the place. Recently, Nigeria also just injected some funds into ECOWAS, $85 million, and about, is it 60 billion naira or 65 billion naira there, or whatever it is.
They said the first time we're paying all our levies in about 90
Well,
days.
first time, very good, but again, they have resources in their hands, right, to move the talk, right, which again will help cover the gap for some ECOWAS countries that do not have the financial might to move these things. Because whatever you discuss, without finance, everything stays on the table. So President Tinubu is not only providing leadership in terms of policy driving system, but he's also putting the fund and, of course, going around the country and around the world to get people on the table for the benefit of ECOWAS and Africa.
I hear you and I understand it. The point I was making, however, has to do with the conversations that happen behind closed doors within, among the ECOWAS leaders. Do they raise human rights issues in individual countries, developmental issues? Because these are the issues that lead to military takeovers. ECOWAS, I don't think, only has the responsibility to say, you know what, juntas, you can't do this, transit back to democracy. I think they can be proactive in calling the leaders, making them accountable before it snowballs into a military intervention.
Well, I'm not privileged to be in the corridor of power where those things are happening, right? I don't have that information. But I've seen one that happened in the past. Before Alpha Conde came in, or thereabouts, I think there was a military leader that transited to democracy and he refused to leave. He kept on changing the constitution and all whatnot. People came, ECOWAS leader came. I'm very sure he was spoken to at the back end, and a lot of discussion happened, right? Nigeria went in with their plane to take him out, right? And the elected president got in. So those are part of conversation that happen at the back end. If they have not discussed with him, if you have not listened to them, I don't think Nigeria will send a plane into that country to get him out and get the rightful person to come in and was sworn in. There are a lot of backdoor conversation that do happen. They talk to themselves. I want to believe so. They talk to themselves, but those talk will not be brought to the frontal line, for people to see whatever they have discussed. It's only their resolutions that will be brought on the table and all what is on the agenda to discuss. But personally, I want to believe that happened. Even when we were student leaders, I was president of Lagos State University, and I know that when we were trying to unify the NANS, which again, I used the LASU platform with the support of a lot of NANS leaders then to unify NANS. I know the amount of discussion we had. I know when I was engaging Moses or Sakede or Blessed Memories, I know the level of meeting I went to Kano, to Yola, and everything before we met in Futa. And at Futa, I engaged him at the Senate meeting that was chaired by Yakasai, Dr. Tanko Yakasai. And at that point, Moses agreed that we should meet in Yola. So you can see the movement that we've been having. And unfortunately, he died on his way to Akwanga. To Makurdi, University of Agriculture, Makurdi, to reinstate some students. So at our own young ages, we were meeting behind the closed doors in front to, discuss and do all of that. And likewise, I believe the leaders of now are also doing the same.
So these three countries, as we speak, have formed their own group. It's called the Alliance of Sahel States. I'm wondering how you think this will impact the balance of power in West Africa, especially with ECOWAS also being a regional bloc.
I can tell you for sure that it won't last. right? It won't last because it was created to solve an impending problem, right? It can only last if it now develop more into an ideological structure, whereby discussion around ECOWAS is not robust, in order to align them on the gains that they will get working with a bigger regional power. No matter what they do with those countries, it cannot be like your sister countries that surround you, because the immediate goods and services that the country will need, right, will be traded around the sub-region than taking it out to those countries. Because those countries only need few resources from you. They will rather bring the finished product to your country, you understand, to sell to your people, which will not help you to develop as much as you want. Yes, they have achieved their purpose to take away their colonial masters. The next thing is, how do you develop your space, develop your people, and integrate with your immediate constituency?
You talked about Russian influence earlier. They have turned to Russia now for military support and cooperation. Some are even suggesting that perhaps it was Russia's influence that played a role in the decision to leave ECOWAS. So that shift of allegiance is key from France to Russia. It isn't something that can probably switch back in another year. You don't think that Russia growing presence is a staying power for them?
Russia is contending with its own issues right now. You saw what happened in Syria. Russia was the biggest backer of Assad. But when there's a fire burning under your sleeves, you tend to try to quench it. Even in the plane, they will tell you that if there's pressure loss or what have you, and the mask is dropped, even your child, you should forget him first. Save yourself so you can save the child. Because if you try to save the child, you also lose your life, and the child will lose his own life. So Russia now is battling for stabilization and all of that. There is no how they would be able to cope with too many pressure all around the place. So this is the best time for them to think well, that look, let's solve this problem within our own space. Let's work with ECOWAS and all of that. I mean, they're not confronted by military pressure right now. They're only confronted by reasonability. That, look, brothers, let's come back. Yes, you have achieved this. Move into transition, right? You can give a 6-month or a 3-month transition period. Move back into a government that involves everybody. Remove the khaki. You two go to the ballot box. If your people love you, they can vote for you. If they don't, respect the outcome of the process. But let's work together.
I understand your concern about Russia, having its own problems, but others will say it is when you're isolated that you need partners. That's why Russia is reaching out radically and massively to Africa, to get that support in the region. One thing is certain: ECOWAS doesn't want these three to leave, but it's not been able to.
ECOWAS doesn't want what?
Doesn't want these three countries to leave. But as we speak now, it's been unable to, stop the departure of Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. Do you think there are lessons that can be learned from this experience? Specifically, how do you think ECOWAS can adapt in such a way to prevent similar situations in the future?
The lesson learned is that people must obey the rule of law, and they must obey the outcome of a credible election system, right? Once that is done, the country is at peace, not to continue to stay in office in perpetuity. When you do that, these are the kind of things that it will breed. The people will react. And the world has gone, very global now, that it's in the hands of everybody. Just through a push of a button on your phone, you see all of these things. But the major thing is that these countries serve as buffer to major ECOWAS countries, right? Especially from the other part of Africa, where they are witnessing a lot of civil unrest, and the proliferation of arms is all over the place. So you can imagine if that buffer, look at when Deby was alive, look at the action Deby took to have led at the front line to confront the terrorists and subdue them within a question of few days and all of that. Those are the gains that Nigeria achieved, and some other countries around the ECOWAS country. So those countries are very, very important in terms of security. And the Chief of Defense Staff, recently during their military games, did achieve a lot, because I watched the TV and I heard that some of the military in those countries also partook in that game, and there are discussions going on. These are part of international diplomacy that Nigeria and the ECOWAS countries are using. If they can still be engaging at that level, the last point is just the form of government. Transit from military to democratic system of government that allows your people to participate on how they will be governed and they will be, taken care of. And all of that, that is the last point of it.
You don't think that the way and manner these three countries have left can potentially embolden others to also, nurse the idea of military intervention?
Any action,
especially now that it's a group that is willing to receive them.
Any action all over the world can spark up any emboldenment anywhere, right? If you do it well, it can also influence other countries to want to do it well the way you have done it. If you do it wrongly too, it can induce some people to start having funny thinking. The major thing is that the leadership in any country must put their people first. You must obey the rule of law. You must obey the laws in your constitution. You must allow people to participate in the activity of political governance. You must allow people to vent, to engage, to discuss, as we're doing. In the process of discussion, whatever pain they have, they'll bring it out. Whatever excuse or answer that you have to their questions, you bring it out. At the end of the day, we will all agree, you understand, to take out the common good from all of what we have said for the benefit of nation. Because after all the power, the next thing is history. How will history record you? So that your offspring will enjoy from the good history that you have put forward. I know of some leaders that have passed through this country that nobody wants to align with the name of such person, or you want to bring them out that these are my idol. I mean, these are people that have helped for me to shapen my career or shapen my thought. But readily, some people also will use some people's name to campaign and push forward. Everybody want to align with Zik. Everybody want to align with Awolowo. Everybody want to align with Ambrose Ali. You understand? And this Talikawa leader from the north, what's his name now? Forgotten his name now.
Escaped me as well.
Aminu Kano. Yeah. Right? These are people that you can easily, quickly write on their names. Everybody want to write on Professor Wole Soyinka's name, Chino Achebe's name. You understand?
Well, maybe not everybody in the sense of everybody.
Everybody that has a good sense of reasoning will want to align with achievement. Everybody want to align with achievement. That is why I said their name, what they have achieved in their life.
I get the point you're making. Senegal's President Faye has been mediating between ECOWAS and these three departing countries. We saw him in Abuja on Sunday, and he's still quite optimistic. But what impact do you see international mediation of this sort? What role do you see it play in the coming months between ECOWAS and these three countries?
Do you want to hear the truth? The international community now have a lot on their table, right? It is only ECOWAS that have great attention for them. And it is good for them to work with ECOWAS to resolve this matter quickly. If you go to UN, there's a lot of problems that are before the Secretary General of the United Nations. Even there are some countries that have blacklisted him already, right? If you go to Europe, the table of Europe is full. If you go to Asia, they are contending with their own issues.
No, but international, I didn't mean outside. I mean countries within the region.
Yes, the subnational regional powers.
Like what the Senegalese president did.
That is why I'm saying that it is only ECOWAS now that have their time, that have the attention to pay, right, that can really help solve this problem. And we have leaders in ECOWAS that can help them to speedily put the transition in place. They have achieved their purpose, which they want to achieve, is to send away their colonial overlord and all of that. And the next thing will be, how do they sustain it, right? They have to come together as a nation to speak on those matters and look at what will benefit them as a country first, which I think they've done. And regardless of whether they are plugged off or not, they still need to repatriate their funds from these countries that they are exiting from, because they need those funds to develop, whether you like it or not. Whatever optics you see from those countries are from small enclaves. Those countries are really very poor. You understand? They're in dire straits. And they need the support of ECOWAS and so many brothers countries around them to help them put their footing back, on line of development.
Let's talk about the role of Nigeria as big brother, not only on the continent, but, in the region. Do you think that we are being challenged to do more? Because some of the conversation has to do with, well, what's happening with the big economies on Africa? What's their international relations like? What's their economy like? The economic policy, how is it paying the people? They say these smaller countries also take their cue from that. Do you think we are under pressure to do better, to retain that leading light and impact positively on the region?
Nigeria has to do more, like we have been doing, because we tend to gain more. If you look at it from the point of security, if you allow any harakiri around borderlines or countries that border you, it's going to flow into you. In terms of the economy, we're trying to resolve the consumption and production of oil derivative and all of that. The more we produce, it moves into all these countries. We are still challenged on how to protect our border space and all of that. Even with the Dangote refinery that is producing, a lot of those trucks still find their way to those countries. So those countries depend on Nigeria. Nigeria is like a big tree that has a lot of other trees growing around it. So Nigeria must take action, must provide leadership for ECOWAS, because ECOWAS survival is based on Nigeria. Take a look, even Ghana. I know a lot of Ghanaians that come to Nigeria here to come and buy goods and take back to their country, regardless of the fact that we get a lot of information that the economy is moving and all of that. You take away the Nigerian factor from all of those economies, they will collapse. So Nigeria must continue to provide leadership, especially for security and protection of our territorial borders.
Let us attempt to open the phone lines and get some reaction from the viewers. George has called in from Ikeja. Good morning, Mr. George. Can you hear me? Please go ahead with your contribution. We may have lost that call. Keep trying. You can also reach us via X. And remember to use the hashtag this morning and tag at Nifemi Oguntoye. Very interesting conversation this morning. I'm looking at, a situation where I think it was the German Chancellor who talked about Nigeria and South Africa being the big economies on the continent that must be reckoned with. Mr. President was also in Pretoria the other day, talking about how to fine-tune this relationship within the continent. Mr. George is back. Good morning, Mr. George.
Hello?
Please go ahead with your contribution.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Go ahead with your contribution.
Good morning, and good morning to Mr. Dewali.
Good morning, sir.
These three countries that are trying to leave ECOWAS, I think ECOWAS is doing the right thing. If you ask me, I would not even give them extra 6 months. They are the ones that have something to lose, not ECOWAS, if they pull out of ECOWAS. It is a military government is not a fashion anywhere in the world again. And I heard Nifemi say they have formed an association of Sahel states. They didn't remember to complete the name. Association of Military Sahel States. It is. I don't know how they want to live in isolation. If ECOWAS, if I were ECOWAS, I will push expulsion, their expulsion to AU, African Union, and encourage AU to even push it to the United Nations that any country that is under military government should be expelled until they return to democracy. If they claim to be popular, as they are claiming now, that when they came in, people were rejoicing with them, then let them contest elections and let those people vote for them. Why are they afraid to be representing the people? They want to use military coercion to come in there and then seek expulsion from us. If you are in a foreign, if you are in a group, you are bound by the tenets and rules of that group. If you are in ECOWAS, the rules of ECOWAS should be binding on the members. If they cannot obey the rules of ECOWAS, they are free to go. They should be the ones running to come back to beg for readmission. They want to be going to United Nations meeting in Turkey. How does that look? Which other country is doing that? It is not an excuse, for them to say that the governance, because there is no good governance, that's why they have to bring the military. Is the military better?
Thank you for your contribution, Mr. George. That's our time. We have to go now, comrade. It's a lot of distraction from what should be happening on the continent. For instance, we're looking at the African continental free trade area, which is yet to come to full-fledged. The need for the wealth to go around and, improve our economy as a continent. Do you see this as a distraction? How do you think we can be more united going forward? In a minute, if you can.
Well, we have to be intentional about it. We have to look at what will create more income for all of these countries. And I think that free trade zone project is very, very important. And the ECOWAS nation must focus more on it. And God will help us all for it.
We're counting on that. Comrade Ayodele Adewale, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Thank you for having me.
Compliment of the season to you.
Thank you.
That's our show today, everyone. Thanks for being a part of it. We'll see you again soon. Stay with us.
Information is power, information is security, information is knowledge. On Labor Lens, we believe that working people around the world have real questions of their own. They want to know how the world of work operates, what it means to the employer of labor, how policies affect workers in the workplace. On Labor Lens, I ensure we engage effectively the organized labor, organized private sector, and government to get out of them information workers are in need of. I am Sharon Ijason, asking questions that make you get sense of the workplace.
Meet Benga Oreshegun, a fearless voice and an advocate for the truth. He's bringing fresh energy and bold insights to journalists' Hangout.
Get ready for deeper analysis and dynamic perspectives. Join me and Babajide Kolade Otitoju with other veteran journalists on Journalists' Hangout. Weekdays from 5 p.m. and on Sundays, 1:30 p.m.
Sometimes it's the story that calls. At other times, the people just want to be heard.
School, I need students, but I need teachers.
Can't continue like this.
Their voices re-echoing through time itself.
We haven't done anything. If the tide is high, everybody run for safety.
Their tears leave a sweet sour taste for all their demands. A familiar call beckoning for change. In our world, no one expects a disaster to happen. But when it does, we'll be there to x-ray all sides, from the east to the west, north and south. Community Forum will examine the oddities and challenges to economic development, as well as issues yearning for government intervention. Watch fresh episodes of Community Forum on Sundays by 9:30 p.m. only on TVC News.
Doubt and fear doesn't occur at the canvas, it shows in the canvas. It shows the conation of raw earthen material slabbed, stroked and molded at a pace provided by the doubt and fear. Every move weigh in the struggle of one to the other, merging the past to the present, brushstrokes of colors seen but not known. For when the wailing stops, the pieces settle down in abject beauty erected for a century of a century. Speaking, advocating, protesting as the arts are meant to be.
You're watching Beyond 100 Days with Nifemi Oguntoye.